New week, another farm system now as we wrap up the American League East here on the call up. He's Jack McMullen. I'm Aram Layton. And like we said, we're running through the Blue Jays top prospects here. A farm system that I think has gotten a little bit better, but also just has a lot of names that we've talked plenty about over the last couple of years. So we always use the term prospect fatigue. Several candidates that would probably fit the bill there. But I would say that just about everybody in this system, at least the top guys, are maybe after a bit of a roller coaster, starting to head back upwards on a bit of an upwards trajectory. We'll talk about the Ricky Tiedemans, the Orelvis Martinez, and of course the Addison Bargers of the world. But what was fun was kind of getting into this farm system beyond those guys, because this has been a farm system that's very top heavy. And I think you're starting to see, with the last couple drafts, with the IFA, you're starting to see it broaden out a little bit. And there's a little bit more intriguing talent outside of the top five now that I'm excited to talk about.
Well, they had a great draft in 2023. I think that's really important. They've got 3 top 15 guys on this list that came from the 2023 draft. And if I'm not mistaken, they were their first 3 picks. Watts-Brown might have been their 4th round pick or something like that. Yep. But it feels like early returns that they nailed their 1st round pick, and they nailed a couple arms that they took in the 2nd and 3rd round that we'll get to in the teens. But yeah, I think they've done really well recently, which is important because I highlighted in the intro, they've got a unique kind of wave of expiring contracts after the 2025 season and the 2026 season. 25, they agreed to an arbitration extension with Bo Bichette. He's done after 25. They did not agree to an arbitration extension with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. He's done. He's a Super 2 guy. Arb 4 is 2025. So Bichette and Vladdy come off the books in 25, and then Springer, Kirk, Varsho, Gausman come off in 26. You need a farm system.
Yeah.
That kind of sounds like a Windows closing. Does it not?
Yeah. It will, or it's going to push them to spend, and that's where it's going to be interesting to see. It seems like it's been everybody kind of saying, oh, it's probably going to be one or the other, Bichette or Vladdy, that they end up bringing back. But maybe depending on how some of these players develop, we'll see if they feel a little bit more urgent, or I guess a little bit more desperate to be able to retain both of those guys, because you do feel good about the way some of these bats are trending, especially 2 of the top bats, but they're not going to be Vladdy or Bichette. So it's going to be interesting to see how they approach it this year too, because a lot of their top prospects are very close to big league ready, and it's busy in the infield over there. They've added some pieces already, to an already crowded infield. You have the emergence of Davis Schneider. You have who, by the way, would have been graduated by these standards, otherwise would have been in the top 15. But you have Isaiah Kiner-Falefa being brought in here. And then you have other guys that are pretty close to being ready. So I'm interested to see, how they handle Orelvis Martinez this year, being that there's not much more for him to show in AAA. Addison Barger, does he get some opportunity? I'm just kind of curious to see how some of these pieces fit in, because they're very talented on the big league side, but some of these prospects are kind of getting older now. And do you trade them? Do you eventually just wait for them to fit in? Do you trade a Biggio at the top? Like, they've got a lot of decisions to make. I think that could end up being made during the season based on the performance of the prospects and some of the guys at the big league level.
And even then, man, what's the value for Kevin Biggio? If Manoah is bad again, what's the value of Alek Manoah? There are so many tough decisions that Ross Atkins is going to have to make in June. And I don't envy what he's going to do whatsoever, because if you send Orelvis Martinez to AAA, he's going to OPS 820. I feel strongly about that. At the very least. If you send Addison Barger to AAA, he's going to OPS 820 at the very least. If you send Tiedemann to AAA for a whole year, this guy might set a strikeout record. These guys are beyond ready, and I know we're going to get into all of them.
100%. And then again, talking about the depth here, I do think it's slowly but surely getting stronger, which leads us right into the names to watch. As always, link is in the episode description. Go check that out if you want to follow along with us and read, each of the write-ups that we have. Jack, take us through the names to watch.
Give me a guess. How do you say Jace's last name?
Barofin.
I was thinking Barofin.
Barofin.
It's not Borofin. I think it's Barofin.
Barofin. Bohrofen for those who are not following along. That's
tough. Our first name to watch is Jace Baraffin, outfielder who was, I think, sixth-round pick out of Arkansas this past year. He was awesome at Arkansas. Hit just around 320, OPS well over 1,000 at 1050, 60 games this spring. And then he shows up at the complex in Dunedin. I think it was 7 games at the complex, 17 in low A. And this guy got off to a great start. He had a 1080 OPS with 7 homers in 24 games. He had 23 homers in 84 games if you combine his stint at Arkansas and in the minor leagues. Granted, the minor leagues were lower levels than a college bat should see. However, understandable that you send a 6th-round pick there.
Yeah.
If the power's there, you find a spot for this guy to climb. I just don't think we knew that the power was there before his draft year.
No, and I think this is definitely literally a name to watch, right? Because I think like if we were able to get a little bit more action in low A or even high A, I think he could have made a case for the top 15 just because of some of the batted ball data, what we saw him do, against college competition, the approach being pretty patient. We're seeing him be able to tap into power in games. Like this is definitely somebody that if you're a Blue Jays fan, I think you're eager to see how he handles high A this coming year. And if he handles it pretty well, I mean, he's 22. He could be a solid prospect for them and a nice little find in the middle rounds.
Yeah, I'm going to clump these next guys together, these next 2 together, because they play the same game, and I like one way more than the other. Addison Brown is the first one. I like Cam Eden more than I like Addison Brown. Addison Brown made Team Canada for the World Baseball Classic because he flies. Mm-hmm. Yes, he flies. I see some outlets have him as an 80 runner. It's weird to say he only has 25 bags a year, but like this guy hasn't eclipsed 30 stolen bases in a given season. And I'm just wondering where they are. And the bat is not good enough. It's not a major league bat. Cam Eden is a tweener bat. The difference between Addison Brown and Cam Eden is Eden in 2021, 30 for 32 in the stolen base department. In 2022, 36 for 41 in the stolen base department. And in 2023 in Buffalo, 53 for 57 in the stolen base department. So he's stealing way more bags than Addison Brown. He's doing it at a higher efficiency than Addison Brown. And the icing on the cake is his nickname is literally Ka-Chow in ode to Lightning McQueen. So if one of them is going to be the Gerard Dyson, I think it's Cam Eden and not Addison Brown.
Yeah, most likely. And I think you're looking at like the 4th outfielder mold as what you're hoping for. And you still got to hit a little bit to do that. I think Brown obviously has more projection, younger, physical, a little bit more physical, but also just the hit tool being far behind. So yeah, it's limited ceilings, but yeah, I'm with you. I think Eden older and even more limited, but also, is able to fill that role already a little bit better.
There are 3 relievers on this list, and we're getting to the first of 3. Tells you it kind of drops off after 15, and 15 is probably a reliever. We'll get to him in a moment. Mason Fluharty, a left-hander that got up to Double-A. He was a reliever his entire time at Liberty. Did you watch any Mason Fluharty video during all this? Like the data the data does not scream top 15 at all. What I will say is he's got a very Crochet-esque delivery where he's almost like shot putting it from his left shoulder and he's wrapping it around on the 3/4. I'm going to like kind of move into the screen. So he's here, he's turning his body, and then he's spinning the crap out of a slider. And that is a left on left matchup from hell. So this guy is a left on left nightmare. Yep. I don't know if he's anything more than that.
Yeah, well, it's funny from that release too. It's like it's cutter slider, and you're getting that. You talk about a guy that's definitely a supinator. He's ripping them. Left on left sliders were just a problem for hitters last year. Hey, he held them to a batting average below 100. They were 3 for 45 against it with 29 Ks. So that pitch will get him in a big league bullpen, no doubt.
But the fastball is not good. Like the fastball may get hammered. If he does the Whistler thing and he throws 90% slider, then like, hey, he could put up a great year in a bullpen. Rafael Antigua is a guy that is not on any top 30 list for the Blue Jays. I get it. He's been around a long time, since 2019. I get it. He's 25 years old. I get it. He's a small guy. He plays everywhere. He played third, short, second, left, center, right. And he walked at, a 17% clip last year? He hit 305 with a 425 OBP, and he slugged more than double his weight. He hit 40 doubles, and he swiped 28 bags. I don't get why this guy's off of every top 30 list.
Yeah, I know. I get like he's small and there's probably not everyday offense to dream on here, but you hit the nail on the head. He walks with the best of them. He doesn't strike out. He plays all over, and he puts up good numbers. This has to be a top 30 guy because you could find a 40-man role for him, and if there's a 40-man role for him potentially, like that's a top 30 guy. He will have big league time. So even though he's older, I do think he's a decent bench piece and has just enough pop. He snuck out 13 homers. Like it's more than probably a lot of people would have expected if you combine, the winter league and what he did last year.
Well, and it's gap to gap juice too. Like 40 doubles in Buffalo is really impressive. 40 doubles across a AAA season.
Yeah.
Note who the longest write up is. Is Parmigiani 16? He's got to be 16 on this list.
He's darn close. Yeah, I would say it's probably him. Yeah, if we're talking about like who would be the guy, the next up that just missed the top 15. Like, yeah, I mean, it stinks that I didn't get to see him perform in the Arizona Fall League. I caught him in the midst of a bit of a slump, but he hits the living crap out of the ball. And he's made enough contact so far. Like he's going to strike out, but the contact rates are not egregious. I would almost surely say he's 16 here.
Right. So Damiano Parmigiani, he played a lot of third base on his way through the minor leagues. He got a lot more run at first base. He probably looks like a first base DH long term. Is he passable at third base?
I don't think he's terrible there at all. That was the one thing I did see at the Arizona Fall League is I thought he was passable.
Okay. Interesting note that from low A to triple A, this guy never walked at a clip under 10%. So he's always going to walk. And over the last 2 years, he's got 47 homers and 58 doubles. Like
Elevates.
He's power. He is power. Elevate, celebrate, sick name. He's going to find his way on a big league roster at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just say the last thing is I could see kind of like a lefty masher role potentially. Like hits the 106 mile per hour, 90th percentile. There's going to be a big league role for him.
For sure. There seems to be a big league role for Alan Roden, but I assume you're not sold on the ceiling with Roden. He's like a consensus top 10 guy in this system, and he's outside the top 15 for you.
Yeah. I think it's the hit tool that people are, bullish on. And that's why you could make the case like Roden might have been like right at 16 or 17 as well. But he's 24. There's really minimal power. I don't like the swing. Like it's a really unique and it's a unique setup. And I just don't know how much juice is in there. He puts the ball on the ground. It's very pull dependent. Like I don't think he hit a ball opposite field, like let alone a home run. I think he snuck one home run out opposite field, but there's pretty much almost nothing with authority the other way. So he's out and around. It's a lot of ground balls. It's a weird setup. He's not very fast. He's probably limited to a corner and doesn't have power. Like I just really struggle to figure out the profile. There's a lot of pressure on the hit tool. He's going to have to hit, over 300 to be a regular. I see why people like him because the contact rates are so good, but I don't think the swing is going to translate as well. I think the hit tool will start to back up a little bit because of those moves. And then, you don't have much power, defense, or really much else to fall back on.
Do you think this is similar to the Tyler Freeman situation we had in Cleveland like 2 years ago? Everybody loved him because he never whiffed. And then they realized that the ceiling was just so capped that he started to fall down those boards. And we haven't seen Tyler Freeman stick in the big leagues yet when he's been quote unquote ready for the last 2 years. And at a certain point, he was the number one prospect in that Cleveland system.
Yeah, I think it's very similar because if Roden could play center field, like, okay, maybe
Different
this profile is more palatable. Freeman was playing like a consistently good shortstop. Maybe it's a little bit more palatable, but I think even then, like the offense was just not there. This guy in a corner, it just doesn't. I just don't really see how you could justify playing him every single day because he's not going to be Stephen Kwan. So it's a tough profile, but again, he might just be one of those guys that hits and hits and hits and hits. And I eat crow for that one, but I struggle to see it. And I felt like, he was just a little bit more advanced than everybody else he was facing. We'll see how it looks in AAA, but it's hard to argue against the numbers. And he seemed to put together a really nice season last year.
Yeah. Two more guys real quick, because I think they're kind of the same, but with different pitches. Diane Santos is a right-hander in high A. Yasver Zulueta is a guy that everybody knows all too well because he's thrown in the last two Futures games. They both seem to be right-handed relievers. Zulueta is mid to high 90s with like a heavy fastball, kind of a sinker type, and a hard slider. Santos is low 90s fastball and then a sweeping slider. They strike out a lot of guys. They walk a lot of guys. A lot of guys. They both seem to be relievers.
Yeah, I mean, Zulueta, louder stuff. Santos, probably a little bit better command. I mean, again, it's like pick your poison there.
Yeah.
Yeah, pick your poison. I mean, Zulueta has the stuff to be a high leverage reliever. So, yeah, I know people have him ranked a little bit higher, but I'm just wondering, like, at some point we got to kind of give up on, oh, well, if the command comes along, like he's 26. I don't know if the command's ever going to come along.
Right.
We'll get into the top 15, and I got another reliever, and a reliever that actually looks like he's just about big league ready. Connor Cooke will be the first guy that we talk about here in the top 15. Right-handed reliever, 10th round pick in 2021. He's got good stuff, man. The fastball slider combination is dirty. It's a true sweeper. I think a borderline double plus pitch. He was throwing some that I was watching that were getting over 20 inches of horizontal. I mean, just really nasty. And then the fastball from a low release, this like low 3/4 release, takes off from there. Those two pitches will make him a 7th inning guy, no doubt. The changeup he'll mix in every once in a while to lefties, which is great because when you're a sweeper guy, like that's usually going to have pretty dramatic platoon splits. Sweepers generally do. The changeup's good enough to just sprinkle in there. The command's got to get a little bit better if he's going to reach his like 8th inning ceiling. But I feel pretty confident that a guy that strikes out 40% of batters across 3 levels, you see the pitch data, it looks legit. The slider's disgusting. He's got the body. He's got some deception built in there. He's going to be a big league reliever for them, I think, this year.
Yeah. I caught him for a week. I think his first week in AAA was when Indy was in Buffalo, and he was spinning them to death. And like good hitters too, but right on right, it was no contest with him. And you saw the Gotti numbers from high A and double A. It was a lot of strikeouts, not a lot of walks. You said, okay, how can this be? It's because of the slot. It's because of the slider. He made mincemeat of right-handed hitters. Yep. He could be a specialist, but like he can probably get over that hump if the fastball gets better, and it's already a 55, you think?
Yeah. I mean, he's run it up to 97, 98. And again, it's the lower release, above average carry. I think that fastball is going to play well enough. It's just a little bit more consistency with it. But I think he gets a chance relatively early this season. And I think there's the upside of a quality setup guy.
Sweet.
Number 14, left-handed pitcher, Kendry Rojas, who was signed for $215,000 back in 2020 by the Blue Jays. He's interesting. I mean, second stint in low A as an age 20 pitcher last year, now 21 years old. Longer limbs, so gets above average extension. It's an over-the-top release that I think the fastball just kind of backspins out of. So while it doesn't jump off of the page in terms of shape, it's above average carry, but I think there's a spin component to it that makes it, kind of get on hitters a little bit quicker, paired with slightly above average extension. And that from that over-the-top release. Then you have a slider that flashes above average, and then he tweaked the changeup, went to more of a split grip in 2023, and from being more of a nascent changeup, now it looks like it could be an average third pitch. I thought the splitter actually projected a lot better, flashed a lot better than the traditional changeup he was throwing prior. So you have an average 3-pitch mix, potentially average command. You could probably dream on a 5-starter potentially. I think he's going to need to see a little bit of an uptick because nothing jumps off the page, but decent numbers in low A last year and like 84 innings. And, he's definitely just a solid left-handed arm with a smooth delivery that is worth monitoring.
I haven't seen him at all. I will say that we are hitting the pitching clump for the Blue Jays. Of course, they have, like their lead man when it comes to pitching prospects. But after that, there's a fall off and you see a lot of hitters, a lot of good hitters. And then you get to this like 9 to 15 range. Yeah, 15's a reliever, but like all these guys, when Gausman comes off the books, when Barrios is on the last year of his deal, when Bassett comes off the books, when Kikuchi is 39 years old, like all these guys seem to be timed up to be ready at that point, whether they're in low A as a draft guy or high A as international guy. Rojas kind of screams climb one level every year until
Yeah.
he gets there.
Yeah, and I think you can hope that he sees an uptick, in the velocity, maybe the command, gets even better to where he can just finesse, be that like 3-pitch lefty finesse guy that can massage his way through lineups. But seems like he could be a solid, depth arm and back end of the rotation arm who still has plenty of time to develop, but will be 21 years old all season long.
Yeah.
Number 13 is, I think one of the safer bats that you're going to find, but it's just more about figuring out where he's going to play and how he gets consistent reps. But Spencer Horwitz, who, we've talked about him plenty. Like, the guy deserved an opportunity at the big league level last year, got it and performed. He played very well in sporadic playing time for the Blue Jays. They were hoping that he could potentially play a little bit of outfield, and he saw some action out there, both in the World Baseball Classic, where I saw him really struggle, and then at points in AAA. It seems like he's more just limited to first base, where he can play just an average first base. That's where the challenge is, because Horwitz has an above average hit tool. He has a fantastic approach, and he crushes righties. OPS over 1,000 against righties, under 700 against lefties. So you have a bulk platoon situation here where he can really, be a productive hitter for you, but it would be so much better if he could play anywhere other than first base. And it seems like he probably is not able to. And that's the limitation here for him. But that said, there's a big league bat here, especially with his numbers against righties and the way that he showed in a brief stint at the big league level. It's just, is there enough power there to shoulder the first base situation, the first base profile? The answer may be no. So he may end up just being more of a platoon bench bat, but he'd be a good one at that.
Yeah. And well, do you think there's still time to improve the corner outfield defense? Because if he could be a platoon bench bat that could hop in right or left, that's a game changer. Problem is, you've got a guy that you're going to pay really handsomely, probably moving forward to over 30 mil a year. It's really tough when you've got a franchise cornerstone at first base, because that guy never has to take days off.
Yeah, especially a young one at that too, right?
Right.
Like, it's you don't want Vladdy ever out of the lineup.
Is he older than Vladdy?
Yeah, he is.
Man.
He is.
Yeah.
So I think it's possible. I'd have to watch more video of him, particularly in left. They did continue to give him action out there down the stretch, at least like once or twice a week. He saw a little bit of action at second base, but yeah, if he can develop into even just I wouldn't even say serviceable, just not a detriment in left field, then I think you could end up figuring out, a way to get a lot more playing time out of him and be a platoon piece that can, be very productive against righties.
Dude was pasted all over the AAA leaderboards. He walked like nobody's business last year, and he walked more than he punched out. I mean, dude, give me a first baseman that hit 340. I don't care if it's only 10 homers from the first base position. It's a big ballpark in Buffalo. He hit 340.
32 doubles in 122 games as well. He's a guy that's going to definitely mash you up plenty of doubles there. Some similarities to like Troy Johnston, where it's like the bat is great. It's just, without the power being there, the way that the position demands, like, where does he fit in? And that's, I think, what the Blue Jays are trying to figure out. But they know that Horwitz, at the very least, like in the meantime, when they're in win now mode, that's a great left-handed bat to have off your bench. Probably overqualified to be a bench bat. Up to number 12 now, it's Landen Maroudis, 4th-round pick here in 2023, right-hander out of Calvary Christian. Not the same Calvary Christian down in my old stomping grounds. There's 2 in Florida. One's more central Florida. The other is Fort Lauderdale area. Both are nasty, by the way. And if you could compile a pitching staff from both, I think you'd have a bunch of studs. Lean towards the Fort Lauderdale Calvary Christian, by the way, though, with Andrew Painter, Jake Eater, Christian Scott, and more. That's for another time. But Maroudis, they give him $1.5 million to forego his commitment to NC State. So 4th-round pick, but that's late 2nd-round money. And you can understand why. I mean, he was a shortstop for Calvary Christian High School when he wasn't pitching. He moves really well, obviously, for a 6'3", 190-pound guy. And the changeup already flashes plus. So you've got a guy that already has a great feel for a changeup, a fastball that sits in the low 90s, but you can dream on more projection. And he's just trying to find which of the 2 breaking balls is going to come along. Slider looks better than the curveball, but both were just, from what I was able to see, he hasn't made his pro debut yet. So watching a lot of high school video and showcase video and all of that good stuff, like, the breaking balls are lagging behind. That said, you got potential for above average fastball plus changeup. You figure one of the breaking balls comes along, and I think he can have good command when it's all said and done because of the athleticism. You can understand why the Blue Jays wanted to shell out a little bit extra money here to sign Maroudis and try to go with some upside here in this farm system.
So he was every good high school baseball team had this kid where he was a tall, not lanky, but long kid that was either playing shortstop, third base, or center field. And he moved really well. And then he would start on Saturday. You played him on Friday. He would start on Saturday. And then he would kick your ass on the mound. And it was like, oh, the shortstop's pitching today. He's way better than everybody else. And then he's going to go play shortstop on Sunday. That's him. And a lot of those guys will go play a high level, high major brand of college baseball, and then they get buried with a bunch of those other guys. But it's the ones that make it through that it's like, wow, yeah, I see that athleticism on the hill. And you can clearly see this guy was a damn good shortstop in high school.
Yeah. And if the fastball can tick up a little bit, and with that athleticism and projection, you figure it can. He's got some good arm side run to it where it can play at the bottom of the zone, but he also threw some fastballs with ride and run at the top. So you have those two variations there. Then the changeup is dirty. I think there's potential here for him to be a solid, back end of the rotation starter, but being how early it is in his development and how projectable he is, you could always dream on more than that. And I think that's what the Blue Jays are just trying to accumulate is upside here, especially with their arms as they try to fill out the rest of the system.
For sure.
That leads us right into number 11, which once again, they go with the upside, right? I mean, Juaron Watts-Brown, when it comes to a college arm, he was as raw as they come. And also, I think that's a good thing when you're drafting in the third round, which is where they took Watts-Brown. And he was a guy that had an interesting case because Baseball America actually highlighted this, where he, I think, played football as well in high school, had a shoulder injury from football that forced him to redshirt his freshman year at Long Beach State. So then he was a redshirt freshman the next year and broke out, just shoved. Then transfers to Oklahoma State, where the strikeout numbers were phenomenal, but he struggled with command, and the ERA was inflated to 5. We talk about, especially when you're drafting in the second, third round college arms, you kind of ignore the results in that range, and you want to just kind of look at the stuff because you're not going to get a guy with a sub 2 ERA in college baseball in day 2. But I think Watts-Brown's a perfect target in the third round, a guy that's very raw because he missed his freshman year, very athletic as a 2-sport athlete in high school, and also, striking out the world. Like he was racking up a strikeout rate of 33% at Oklahoma State again against better competition. The question is the command, and is there a little bit more velocity in there? He's 6'4", 220. He's athletic. I think there's some funkiness to him. The slider's already plus, which really helps. Curveball flash is above average. I think it's really just about developing the command and seeing if the fastball can continue to tick up.
Let this dude play sports all day, every day, and the fastball is going to tick up. I promise you that. Like somebody that was, football player that has this natural ability, it seems, and has that physique and these numbers already. The fastball is going to play up. The fastball is going to be, mid to high 90s, you assume, from 6'4", 220. He's fascinating. 73 and a third, 111 punch outs at Cal State, or at Long Beach State, pardon. And then he goes out to the Cape. He has a full workload. He throws 34 innings and he punches out 45. And then 82 and a third, 124 Ks. He strikes out the world wherever he goes.
Yep. So if he can just get that command going, and that's with the fastball really in the low 90s now. I think there's more in there. Watts-Brown's a name to watch in terms of someone who could really make a leap this coming season as he gets his first, first taste of Pro Bowl. They shut him down at the end of last year. So another arm that I'm very excited to see this coming year. Okay, so probably a bit of a surprise to some to see a 2022 first rounder all the way down to the number 10 spot here. But it was a weird and somewhat frustrating year for Brandon Barriera in 2023. Obviously, injuries derailed him, and that's unfortunate. But it was a unique case where you have a guy that shows up and, the body backed up. I mean, he put on weight that, I would say was not useful weight. And then when you have that happen, and then you have 3 different arm flare-ups, right? Like I think spring training had an issue that delayed his start to the season. Then early in the year had an issue that he had to, sit out with for a little bit. And then later in the year had to shut down due to another issue. I believe it was not in any specific order, elbow, like, and then you had bicep, and then you had shoulder. And that's concerning when it's just kind of like all the way up and down there. And he showed up, at the start of the season, I think, in worse shape, like just being honest about it. Like his body definitely backed up. So when you see that happen with some health issues, it's a little concerning, because you wonder, how ready was he to throw, physically. And, we saw the stuff in flashes look good, and I'll get into that in a moment. But I wanted to kind of start with that, as look, he could come out next year or this coming season, be in great shape, and all of a sudden start shoving, and great, we'll move him up. But 3 different arm ailments, showing up to camp in the early parts of the season, just not looking like he did on draft day or even after that. That's a bit of a concerning trend, especially, with some of the things we saw happening at the big league level with one of their other former first round picks.
It's a cliche that is most often used and is most often fair in baseball, and it's you get out what you put in. And like, unfortunately, every organization has an example of this kind of thing. Like, we're watching it unfold firsthand with Sixto Sanchez, right? Like, that guy clearly wasn't working on making his way back. So it's been 2.5 years. It's been 3 years, right? Like,
Yeah.
it could have been one. It's been 3 now. And we're not saying Barriera is Sixto Sanchez, but this guy was drafted at 180 and he showed up at 210. And it's not like he had
And
Popeye
that's
forearms.
and I think that's generous. Like they didn't really give an updated listing weight. Like I honestly think it's more than that.
Yeah, like, that's tough, and I hope everything's all right with him. But yeah, like, here's to hoping that he gets all that right, and the stuff can speak for itself. Because unfortunately, he wasn't on the hill to let the stuff speak for itself.
Yeah, and it's been an interesting trend for him, right? He pitches his way at American Heritage in South Florida, shows really well in the early parts of the spring, shuts himself down. Remember we talked about that earlier on the show, shuts himself down and says, all right, I'm a first round talent. Like, I'm going to shut it down. Maybe there was some underlying arm issues there, like, soreness that, obviously you don't want to document that as you're about to get drafted. So I
Right.
don't blame him, if that was the case, but that was one little like alarm. I was like, oh wow, shutting himself down in the spring. That's interesting. Sometimes you'll see guys kind of say, hey, I'm not going to go more than 4 or 3. And that's understandable, but fully shut it down. And then has these arm issues right away. The other thing that was interesting is on draft day, he had that classic line of like the other 22 teams are going to regret passing on me. So like, I just think that there's a little bit of growing up here. Like I genuinely do. And I think he's super talented. I think he can be great. But there's some trends there that, I think when you look at a year where a guy really struggles to stay on the field, you got to kind of wonder. That said, like, he's a competitor. When I have seen him on the mound, like he looks good in terms of what can be. It's a cut fastball that is funky. From a 3/4 release point that it just misses under barrels in the low 90s, can get up to 94, 95. And that's a dirty pitch when the next pitch you have is a slider that flashes double plus. And that slider alone, I think from that arm slot as a lefty, is good enough to make him a big league reliever. So you have that. He's got to develop a third pitch. The curveball is lagging behind. The changeup he threw like 14 times last year, and like 4 of them were strikes. So he's got to develop those 2 pitches. He's got to first and foremost prove that he can stay healthy. But I think it's tough because guys get hurt no matter what. You can be in perfect shape and your arm, you have arm issues. That's just the reality of it. But you also have instances where, you wonder if there could have been a little bit more prevention baked in. So that's where I'm at with him. It's a unique spot. He was 19 last year. He's a freaking kid, man. So like there's a lot of aspects to it where you could easily have that wake up call this past year, come out this year and look great. So I'm excited. I'm rooting for him. He'll be 20, I think, right at the start of the year. And he's got all the potential in the world, but with the injuries, with the lack of third pitch and just limited looks at this point, it's hard for me to have him much higher than this spot, because I think there is a fair amount of reliever risk here.
I will tell you, weight comes off so easy when you're 19, 20. Like, this is the time to do that. I'm trying at 26. This sucks. I hate this.
Yeah. And again, just super gifted and athletic. So it could come
Yeah.
together real quick for him.
Yeah.
Number 9, Josh Kasevich. And this was a player that, I'll be honest, like there was always one or two of these in a system. And when we go through them, shortstop, like I didn't have a ton on him. And the more I watched them, the more fun and intrigued I was by him. Look, it's hit over everything. And I think there's potential for a plus hit tool here. We're talking potentially 70 grade hit tool, but below average power. I would say fringy speed at best. It's probably slightly below average speed, and an average to slightly above average glove at shortstop, but the ability to play a solid third base, a solid second base, and kind of play all over. Good approach really helps as well. So you have a 70 hit tool with a good approach and the ability to play every infield spot. I feel very confident that he's a utility piece when it comes together. But he's 6'2". You kind of wonder if there's a little bit more thump in there, but the problem is the swing is very, very flat. That is also what allows him to make elite contact, and just rarely miss. But he also puts it on the ground a lot. I think his average hard hit launch angle was 1.5 degrees. So that's a problem-ish.
Yeah.
If you want to be an everyday hitter. But I think Fangraphs throughout this comp, and I loved it. Kevin Newman. It is Kevin Newman-esque, and you can laugh and whatever. That's a big leaguer and a guy that's been around for a while. And I thought I get more excited about the comps in the weeds like that. I thought that was an unbelievable one, but I'd assume it was either Tess or Eric Logenhagen. But the Kevin Newman comp, when I was looking at the stats, I was like, oh, that's good. I loved that comp on Kasevich, and that's a big leaguer.
It's totally a big leaguer and a guy that is still getting he got $2.6 million last year from the Cincinnati Reds. Kevin Newman's real, folks. He's making money at the major league level. So this sounds like a moneymaker. It also just sounds like you like this Alan Roden better than the real Alan Roden. So whatever.
I like it as shortstop.
Yeah, that's the thing. The difference between Kasevich and Alan Roden is playing left field, Kasevich is playing shortstop. And I'll tell you which one's more valuable. WAR will tell you which one's more valuable, et cetera, et cetera. So I like it. 1.5. I think Logan Webb was in the negatives, but I think Framber Valdez last year was right around 1 degree in terms of average launch angle. So it's pretty much a Framber Valdez opponent is Josh Kasevich when it comes to where the ball goes.
You're not helping my case here.
I'm sorry.
No, it's fair. That's something that he's going to work on. But at the same time, he's put up good average, batted ball. I would say some of the contact rates are elite. So now kind of working that a little bit. You don't want to undermine what's the best thing that he has going for him, but you can, I think, elevate that average angle a little bit and still be very line drive oriented. And I'm sure that's something that'll work on. What also kind of put him over the top for me was that approach. And again, the defense, but there's a little bit of physical projection there. His moves are so simple. He's a guy that his timing is impeccable. He starts it so early, it's simple moves, and he is always on time. And I think that's something that, bodes really well. Whereas Roden has these moving parts and he's on time consistently now, but I could see that getting thrown off a little bit more against better competition. I think Kasevich can climb very, very quickly. And I liked what I saw from the defense at shortstop.
Here's another one for you, just in terms of a comp for the batted ball, the launch angle and all that. I'm not trying to bury him with the Framber Valdez thing. Tim Anderson, Alec Thomas, Christian Yelich was a 3.5 degree average launch angle, and he had a good year this past year. It was worse than that during his bad years. You can survive. Ellie De La Cruz had a 3.5 degree average launch angle. You can get by.
Usually the guys that get away with it hit the living crap out of the ball. That's the part that's tough. But to your point, if he hit the ball hard enough and his average exit velocity was palatable, he just has to elevate it a little bit more, but he doesn't have to totally change everything.
You hope it's Tim Anderson.
Yeah, that's tough. Number 8, Enmanuel Bonilla, outfielder, finished the year in the Dominican Summer League, probably will be at the Complex League. Maybe we'll get a taste of him in low A this season. $4.1 million international free agent in 2023. That was a loaded class, and he was the 4th most expensive, largely on his offensive upside, right? This is a guy that boasts a potential above average field to hit, at least an average field to hit. and above average power potential. Right now, he's a center fielder, probably moves to a corner. I think with the offensive upside and the above average arm out there, he could handle a corner really well. This is just more like Bonilla is going to get the ranking ahead of a Kasevich and some of these other guys because the unknown is valuable at this point. Where you're what you're going to get with Kasevich, whereas Bonilla, yeah, there's a lot more variance, but I think he has a better feel to hit than most of his peers. He has the physical projection. He's already flashed exit velocities as high as 108 miles an hour as a 17-year-old, and I think the swing is pretty good. It's just a matter of pitch recognition for him. That was definitely something that stood out to me about how many 17-year-olds are great with pitch recognition. Like
nobody.
He has a great feel for the barrel, but his body would break down, on breaking balls, and he'd get out on his front foot or kind of spin off of it. And then that would undermine, the contact ability. That said, still had solid contact rates. I think the approach and pitch rec will get better. And then when that happens, I think the hit tool will start to shine through more. And we've already seen flashes of above average pop.
Can you scroll up to the grades for Kasevich again one more time? I just want to kind of compare to Bonilla. So Kasevich, you've got 70 future hit, 40 future raw power, 35 game, and then 45-50. So it just seems like Bonilla has the chance to be more well-rounded and less stuck in a template, which I know you value. Like Michael Busch has been a top 100 guy for a long time, and like he's been near the top. I'm thinking about those guys that are 50 to 55 in every single category, and this guy's 50 in every category except power. And that's the one that can give you the greatest bump, I think.
100%. And he could end up growing into even more power than that too. Like it's hard to really, this is the hardest thing to do in the prospect analysis world. I was just talking about this with a couple buddies who are working for teams, and they're like, that's the part that I don't like the most. Like they were talking about, like when I have to write reports on rookie level guys and things like that, like it feels like such a crapshoot, and it is. But also you look at it from this lens, they give him $4 million for a reason. Like the upside is there. And in this stage, when we're talking about, this tier of prospects, the upside is just too tantalizing. And we saw good results in the DSL. I don't like to dive too much into those numbers, but when you look at the swing mechanics, you look at the bat speed, and you look at what can be, I think there's potential for, an above average everyday corner outfielder, which is, better than whatever you can reasonably dream on with Kasevich. Obviously the floor is guy that doesn't even make it to the show, whereas Kasevich, I feel very confident that he at least gets some big league time, but the upside is just so much higher that he just edges him out here in number 8.
That's interesting that you don't like placing too much stock in DSL stats. That's what I love doing, actually.
Yep. It's of course. You should, dude. I've talked about it. I'm going to put together clips of the worst strike and ball calls I've seen from the DSL. It's crazy. Crazy.
I feel like you forget I spent a summer in short season A-ball. That was the worst baseball I've ever seen in my life.
It's crazy. That's why they wanted to consolidate a little bit, I guess.
Yeah.
Which makes sense. Number 7 is an elevated version of Kasevich, which does get the nod just above Enmanuel Bonilla. This stuff broke my brain at points, but Leo Jimenez, he just gets the edge here. Shortstop, but really utility guy that can play all over, and had a nice year in the upper levels last year, finishing up in AAA, just about big league ready now. Good contact skills, sure-handed at shortstop. I know there's just high probability big leaguer, but the difference is he has a little bit more impact. A guy that's posting average exit velocities, and I think that's really important for this type of profile, right? Where we're talking about a guy that does have a good feel to hit, but is able to produce a little bit more impact and is able to, I think, play more positions, and also just has done it more at the higher levels. $825,000 international free agent in 2017. It's pretty hard to argue against Jimenez's results. And I feel like with the versatility that he brings, the ability to play shortstop and then all over as well, it just seems like he's going to have a solid big league role one way or another.
I know you place a lot of value in plate discipline, like maybe more than some tools. What would he grade out as if you were to give like a plate discipline grade?
He's up there. Like I'd say at least a 55. He makes good swing decisions, doesn't chase. I think leverages his hitters counts pretty well to let it eat. Yeah, I'd say easily 55.
There were a couple of guys that came up in droves during the week that Indy was in Buffalo, and Leo Jimenez was one of them. Palmigiani came up a little bit later in the week, and like Palmigiani was the one, like he just hit the ball so damn hard. We were watching, and it's like, oh wow, like that guy's the guy. But Jimenez, he's one of those guys that you're shocked that he was 22 years old this
Yes.
past year. It's like, wow, he plays like a 25-year-old. He was playing like Rafael Antigua, but he's 4 years younger or 3 years younger. So like that was my big takeaway. I watched him for a week, and my thing was, okay, he's probably 4 years ahead of where he should be.
That's the thing. Very polished. And as you mentioned, like put up great numbers in Double A. He met his match in Triple A, but he was 21 at the start of the season last year and got added to the 40 man for a good reason. Like the guy can, I think, if he was exposed in the Rule 5, he's probably taken just because of how advanced he is for a 22-year-old. But then again, the velocity, the exit velocities were surprising to me. I was expecting him to be closer to Kasevich, but 88 mile per hour average exit velocity is, right on par with the big league average. And then a 90th percentile that was just about on par with big league average at 103. So those are things that stand out to me because you saw it translate into his first season with a slugging percentage, at least in the Double A level, especially with a slugging percentage over 400. We didn't see the contact really take a hit. He walks at a 10% clip. He doesn't strike out. And the defense just continues to look solid. I feel like this is a piece that probably makes some of the depth that they have at the big league level expendable soon. Like I'm looking at Santiago Espinal. I think it's a super easy comp. I think I even mentioned it in the write-up here. He's Santiago Espinal, except he could play shortstop at a solid level, which, I mean, that's kind of the thing that's holding Espinal back. He's been a 1 to 2 win player. If he could fill in at shortstop, it's probably closer to 2 to 3 win player. That's a solid high-end utility piece. And I think that's what makes Jimenez a little bit more elevated than even an Espinal. And that's why I think he's become very underrated.
Well, and what stinks is like if Espinal could pass at shortstop, then they don't spend $15 million on IKF. And if they felt like Leo Jimenez could pop up and fill in there, then they don't spend $15 million on IKF. Problem is, Bichette was unavailable for, I want to say, a month or two last year. What happened? They tanked it. Like it was not good at shortstop. Feels like this guy might be the safety blanket, but apparently he's not ready, and they got to go with Isaiah Kiner Falefa.
and I get it because he isn't quite ready. He needs more time in AAA, and that's why they went with that route. But I think you bring up a great point. I think the second IKF is gone, or even going into next year, they might end up just moving him because I do think it's Jimenez's role to take over there, which I think he'd do really well in.
Yeah.
Number 6, I think we're going to be the high guys on Chad Dallas, right-hander, who was a 4th round pick in 2021. And by the way, had a really nice appearance in his first spring training outing. I actually talked about it on the bonus call-up episode that we put out this weekend. Really excited to put that first one out. Definitely, if you want to go check that out, subscribe. That link is in the episode description. You can go check it out, but very excited to have that rolled out and be providing those bonus episodes every single week here. But Chad Dallas was one of the names I mentioned in the bonus episode, and I said you're going to end up having to talk about him more on this Blue Jays top prospect episode. But he's got a really good pitch mix, man. And I think just seeing the stuff tick up slightly with a slider that's plus, a fastball that's big league average, a cutter that's a big league average pitch, a curveball that flashes above average, and that's an easy 4-pitch mix that I think could put him into the back end of a rotation. Changeup's a work in progress, but I don't know if he needs it as much because he has that downer breaking ball and he has the cutter that he can work on lefties. He likes to throw that cutter to lefties a ton, backdoors them plenty, runs it in on their hands, and then has the downer curveball. So I think the changeup eventually just gets phased out. He's got the fastball and slider that just dominate righties. He'll mix in the cut, can even mix in the curve. I think the arsenal is really good for even platoons. The command has gotten better and better. I think it now projects his average. The fastball, nothing jumps off the page, but it's average velocity, slightly above average, shape to it and characteristics. This is a big league 4-pitch mix and solid command. I think he could be a 4-starter, likely a 5-starter, but I feel pretty good about it.
So, trivia time with Chad Dallas. He was drafted in 2021 out of the University of Tennessee. Do you know? I think Dallas was the Saturday guy that year. Do you know who the Friday guy was for Tennessee
In 2021?
in 2021? 2022 was Drew Beam, Dolander, Burns, and one more. I'm forgetting. But that was 2022. Xander Sechrist. 2021. Friday guy was
Tennessee.
blank. Saturday guy was Chad Dallas.
Friday guy, Tennessee 2021. It's going to piss me off, but just tell me.
Jeopardy sound. Blade Tidwell.
Ah, yeah. I actually probably wouldn't have pulled that one out. I that's just one of those names I don't attribute to a college immediately.
Yep.
Oh, that's a
Blade
pretty good
Tidwell with the
1-2
Mets.
punch.
Great 1-2 punch. Dallas was fun in 2021 at Tennessee. I'm curious, like, you just think this guy is so well-rounded that he
Yeah.
can be a 4.
Yeah. And I think the stuff is just kind of on this upward trajectory. You have like you see 50 and future 50, but like that's big league starter 50, which means it's just an average big league fastball. That's fine when you've got a banger slider, and then a downward just sharp curveball that continues to get better, and then that cutter that he likes to command east west really well. So like I just think there's so many ways that he can change his looks. We saw the command keep getting better. I think there's some characteristics that could end up making the fastball a little bit better. The velocity is slowly increased as well. So if he gains another tick, then I think it's even better. And it's just kind of low release as a smaller, compact guy, which I think is part of the reason why people write him off. But he's strong and pretty athletic. I think Dallas is just a high probability back end of the rotation arm. And I mean, in this system, that's a number 6 guy for me.
Yeah, I get it.
Number 5 is left-handed pitching prospect Adam Macko, who I think will have as much helium as maybe any southpaw in the minors in the early parts of this year if he can stay healthy. It's a big if, but he showed some great things last year in that department, and really the stuff came along with it. Macko was acquired in that Teoscar Hernandez trade from the Mariners, and what was interesting about that was that trade went down after he had been shelved with some arm issues, which to me says, okay, he obviously passed the physicals or the medicals that were provided to the Blue Jays were positive enough for them to pull the trigger on this trade. Like this wasn't a nothing trade. Macko was a big part of it. So I think those medicals at least were something that the Blue Jays were willing to either take a chance on or were confident would get better. And so far they've been correct. He comes back, I think right around later May, and looks great last year. And just got better and better and better. And the fastball velocity continued to tick up, and the stuff is just nasty. I mean, for those that are watching on YouTube right now, you can see this curveball that he throws that just left on left is a nightmare, but it works against hitters from both sides of the plate. And not only was it his career high to eclipse 80 innings, which was huge to see. How about this, Jack? Tell me if this sounds good to you. You eclipse your career high in innings, and while doing so, in the final 4 appearances, sit at the highest average velocity of your career. So you eclipse your career high, where most guys start to fade, and instead of fading, his final 4 starts, he actually ticked up. I don't know if I've really seen that, where a guy ticks up in his final 4 starts, just kind of out of nowhere. And that's exactly what he did. He averaged 93 and change, the entire year. And then in the final 4 starts, averaged 94.8 miles per hour. It's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. I'm in. Yeah, like he's unique, man. And we were talking about him a little bit pre-record. I don't know. He's an interesting cat, and he's got one of those interesting backstories too. I'm going to get his story, and then I'll kind of let you walk through pitch by pitch. He was born in Slovakia, Bratislava, Slovakia. I don't know why the Arrows were born. He was actually born in Bratislava, Slovakia. But then he comes to Canada, and I just looked up the 2018 Vauxhall Baseball Academy roster. Adam Macko and Damiano Palmigiani, Vauxhall, Alberta, Canada. It's in the middle of nowhere. I did the Apple map this afternoon when I was doing Palmigiani. I was like, they have one restaurant, and it's like a Chinese buffet. and they have a gas station, and that's about it. And then they have this baseball academy plopped in there. And Macko and Parmigiani happen to be on the same roster in the middle of nowhere, Alberta. Found it fascinating, but kind of nice that those two are kind of pacing similarly, could be on the same big league team. Shit's good, man. And like, it is a matter of health. He's fun, and you can tell that he's a little bit of a leaner in a good way. Like, you can see his upper body kind of drifting towards the plate. I'm not sure how much side view you watched, or if you even had access to side view. You can kind of see it here, but like, that's a guy whose body is straight up, and he's working down, 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 and then he explodes on the mound. It's very clean.
Which is huge, and I think that's part of the reason why you get this this above average induced vertical break from a lower release height. Because the guys that drop and drive are going to have that naturally lower release point, and then that allows the fastball to kind of play up off of that and have more carry. And I think for him, he had the above average carry, but when the carry's above average from a slightly below average release point, like, yeah, your fastball will play pretty well in the low 90s. But once you get to the mid 90s, then those characteristics really compound with the added velocity to make it a problem for hitters. And that's what we saw over the final 4 starts when he was averaging pretty much 95 miles per hour. That's including a postseason start as well, against a very talented Everett team, where in those 4 starts, 20 innings, 4 hits, 1 earned run, 31 Ks. Like, that's going to play. That's a 42.5% strikeout rate. The command's a work in progress in terms of getting it to, where he can keep the walk rate below 10%. But we're talking about an arsenal here where you have an above average fastball, a plus curveball, an above average slider, and a changeup that's at least flashed average from time to time. That's a guy that can get away with fringy command and be a back end of the rotation starter. Yeah, you got to pallet the walks here and there maybe, but I think he'll miss enough bats to be a back end of the rotation starter with those 2 breaking balls that differentiate really well. I think he's not going to really have any platoon issues either. Can get righties out with that arsenal. And if that velocity holds, the way we saw it at the end of the year, I think he's going to be a guy that really starts climbing up top prospect lists. And it's hard to argue against the underlying pitch shapes and characteristics that he has going on. I also love the distinct speeds. So you've got that fastball from a lower release, above average carry, but that really compounds into, I think, more whiff when you get that from the low 90s to the mid 90s. Like, you can get away with that, and you can have slightly above average fastball, looking at Chad Dallas, or even average fastball with low 90s velocity, maybe a little bit more than that, and the characteristics. But when you get closer to that 94, 95 range with those characteristics, that's where I think you really see the whiff tick up. And that's exactly what happened with Macko. And then for him, I think everything tunnels well off of that release point, because he's got the slider working well off of that, the downward curveball. And I think just having those 2 pitches tunneling really well off of his fastball, the fastball setting the tone a little bit more at a higher velocity, I think really makes for uncomfortable at-bats for hitters. You have these distinct speeds as well, where you're really going to get that fastball closer to the mid-90s, that curveball in the upper 70s, the slider in the mid-80s, and then a changeup that'll mix in the low 80s, all tunneling off of each other, all with different action. It just seems like he could really explode this year if he stays healthy, and it looks like he's heading in the right direction in that regard. I think even with maybe some fringy command, he could be a number 4 starter. If the command makes a leap, might be a little bit more potential than that.
Well, and the thing that separates him is that command at 22 years old. Like, he's in a good spot. Just keep progressing. It's, hey, keep getting healthy, keep getting through seasons healthy, and everything is naturally going to figure itself out. We are in like best shape of my life season with spring training. However, you get these young guys, especially prospects, you naturally expect them to ascend. You expect them to get better year by year. And this is a clear candidate that, like, if he takes the steps that frankly we expect him to take, he's going to continue to look like a top 5 prospect in the system.
He's going to be one of my breakout picks. And that's something I'm looking forward to doing. Like, we're going to, do that as the season gets a little bit closer, but with health, if the health is there, I think this is a guy that's going to become a very popular pitching prospect with that arsenal, with the underlying data and the results there as well.
If my breakout is Yu-Min Lin, can I still be on the pod?
He's like the opposite of a breakout. Like, I think he's a guy that already broke out and is going to trend back the other way.
If my damn, I don't know. I got to think of a fun one.
That'll be a fun episode, though. I'm looking forward to that. Checking in at number 4 is Addison Barger, a guy who I actually think can, I guess it would be like a bounce back in a way after, what he did in 23 after the breakout in 2022. But I thought Barger's 23 season was better than maybe the stats may indicate. And I think there was some positives out of it. So with Barger, obviously drafted as a shortstop, like is played mostly shortstop through his professional career. And I think part of, once he broke out in 2022, we saw him pretty much on most top 100 lists. But then he ends up, taking a step back a little bit in 23 in AAA offensively, if you look at the stats, and then starting to move off a shortstop, playing more third and right field. But I honestly think there were some things that looked really good last year. Because one, I think you kind of knew that it wasn't really going to happen for him at shortstop. And if it did, like he was going to be stretched a little thin there. He looks fine at third. And then I was actually really impressed with him in right field. And I think that's really important because we talk about where guys fit in, the versatility. There's a power hitter. There's a power profile. And you get a guy that swings hard and is trying to do damage from the left side. And now, he's able to play third and right field. Like, I think it's a really fun profile. And what I loved is that arm is a missile. It's a double plus arm, and it really plays in right. He already had some really impressive outfield assists, covered the ground really impressively, I thought, for a guy that had not played there at all. But the other thing that really stood out to me was, yes, he takes a step back in terms of production. Part of it was, I think they wanted to, flatten the swing a little bit because he was just so exposed to stuff at the top of the zone, always just trying to do pull side damage. And he actually improved a lot in the bat to ball department, has struck out much less over the last 2 seasons, started to walk more. And honestly, his EVs were better too. His 90th percentile exit velocity ticked up to 106, but the production wasn't there because he was hitting the ball on the ground and on a line more than he was hitting it in the air. So he's got to find the sweet spot where now he's improved the bat to ball, but it came at the expense of his power. So how can he still leverage that big impact that he has? And we're talking about comfortably above average power and still also leverage the improvements bat to ball wise. That's going to be the big thing to watch this year. But we're talking about a guy that I think showed that he can improve the bat to ball, improved his approach, which was huge. He used to be really aggressive, walked more than ever before. Still, we saw the raw power. If anything, he actually was hitting the ball harder and now showed, hey, yeah, I might not be a shortstop, but I can play third and I can actually play a pretty good right. This is a fun profile of a guy that also, by the way, hits lefties pretty well. So it's not even just a platoon situation. He can play every day and end up moving back and forth between third and right and give you at least solid defense, average defense in both of those spots.
My only thing is, are you worried about that front foot? Like, it's a very high leg kick. Does he time it up well?
He seems to time it up well for now. Like it's been amazing because I definitely was concerned about that. And especially when you saw the chase and whiff higher at the lower level, it's like, okay, well, how's that going to look at the upper levels? Well, we saw him put up numbers in the upper levels in 2022. And then we've seen him even just smooth some of those moves a little bit more and started a little bit earlier in 23. And contact wasn't the issue. It was angle. And that was the thing that he kind of worked on to try to make more contact. So I think he just kind of got caught in between here. But he just seems to be one of those guys that I think is going to buck the trend of what we're usually looking for with hitters where, yeah, like those are moves that if a guy whiffs, you're probably like, hey, he's got to calm those moves down. But I mean, he posted slightly above average contact rates. And I mean, those moves allow him to do some major damage. So it's one of those things where it's just like, until it's a problem, it's not a problem. And the fact that he has good numbers left on left too, makes it hard for me to really point towards those moves and say, hey, that's not going to work.
Well, and it's part of what makes him him. So like, as long as you keep him unique and keep him an individual, then it's good. And, I feel like with those guys in particular, if you ask Zach Neto to cut the shit with his big knee kick at the beginning of his swing, it's like, well, he's going to try and figure something out and then he's going to become robotic and he's not going to be Zach Neto anymore. And they clearly love who Addison Barger is. So don't mess with it.
And the fact that he's been able to improve bat to ball wise, improve approach wise, while not really changing any of those things, like that's what stands out to me. Like it really was about more the path, but he didn't have to change those pre-swing moves. I think that it's slow building and starts early and that he gets to the same spot consistently every time really helps him. And I mean, it's a swing that is geared for damage. And I want him to, sell out a little bit more for lift. The swing decisions improving are going to help with this, the swing and miss that I think was happening here and there. And at the end of the day, this guy's got to hit for power to be who he can be and be a regular. But I think with average hit, improved approach, above average power, the ability to play multiple positions, and he can still plug in at short, can plug in at second.
Yeah.
You've got this like super utility, I think like more towards that Chris Taylor type. Of course, he's not playing center and shortstop, not quite as athletic, but you're getting, above average offense and a guy that can kind of play all over. I think that's a really fun regular.
100%.
Number 3, a guy that we are very excited to see more of as we get our first full season of him this coming year. Arjun Nimmala, shortstop, first round pick in 2023, 20th overall. We love the pick. We've talked about how exciting he is. We talk about great defensive potential at shortstop, a phenomenal athlete, a guy that packs a punch in the box, just wiry, strong, with room for even more strength. And I think this is a guy that, when it's all said and done, you can be looking at above average tools across the board, and a feel to hit that's pretty impressive. I think it's really underrated, though, how much impact he already has for a guy of his build, and a guy that's kind of, more lean and compact. I think there's even more in there. He could be a really tooled up and fun shortstop that I cannot wait to see more of this coming year.
We've talked about a couple guys in the top 10 now that are like 50s across the board, like maybe 155. This guy could be 55s across the board, possibly. You've got 55 present. You think he's going to slow a touch. But the big separator, like Marcelo Meyer is 55s across the board, except for the defense, right? He's a 65 defender. Marcelo Meyer, maybe close to a 70 defender. Nimmala is not that, but it almost seems like Toronto grabbed the poor man's Marcelo Meyer at the end of the first round this past year.
Yeah, and I think there's more athleticism even there too, where Meyer was a little bit more polished of a hitter, but you've got a guy that's, I think, a little bit twitchier. Still, you mentioned the defense being really good there, and I think he could be on that kind of trajectory. And Nimmala had a lot of helium as the draft got closer, and I think if he had more time, he's one of the youngest guys in the class. He probably could have ended up being a really high draft pick, even higher than 20th overall. But it's kind of a guy that we just need to wait and see more of. But the moves in the box are already pretty advanced for a guy like him. And I mean, the twitch, the bat speed, the strength already, that wiry strength that you can dream on more. I think you can dream on above average power, above average speed, above average defense at shortstop, and an above average hit tool. That's a top shortstop prospect. So this is a dude that how he does this year could really help him ascend. He's already a top 100 guy for us, but I think could really ascend into that, top 30, 40 prospect in baseball if he really does the things that we think he can do, across the board.
Yeah.
Number 2, Orelvis Martinez, guy we've been talking about forever, $3.5 million international signing in 2018. And it's been a roller coaster for him, but I think it's heading back up to a good spot now. And you got to be pretty excited about what you might have here with Orelvis, just trying to figure out where he fits in. But he has done so many things well in terms of improving his concerns offensively. I thought last year was kind of everything you could have wanted from Orelvis and more. He elevates, he does damage. We know that this is a guy that's going to, hit as many home runs as singles through stretches, but now has become a more well-rounded hitter. And I think that was a key thing for him was, okay, how can I cut down on the whiff? I don't want to be selling out for pull side power, and also just improving the approach. He did all of those things this past year. Walked, I think, as much as ever. Breaking balls were a disaster for him in the past, but simplifying some of his moves with 2 strikes, kind of starting more stacked in his backside. Yes, he has a big leg kick, but he starts it earlier. He repeats it better, and he's starting more in a position to where he doesn't need to travel as far to get to his slot, and it's not as hard for him to stay there. And the results were pretty evident, right? We talk about a guy that had an OPS under 600 against breaking balls in 2022. That was up over 800 against those pitches in 2023 against better competition. Also improving his lower half in terms of starting a little bit more on his backside, repeating those moves more. It also resulted in more power, more raw power. His 90th percentile exit velocity jumped. We saw a lot of good things. So talking about a guy who improved his approach, improved his ability to hit breaking balls, and is still doing that damage that made him, such a highly touted prospect for so long, just lifting and crushing to the pull side. You got to feel pretty good about where Martinez is out at, even if he's going to end up, playing third base instead of shortstop.
He's the one that made me upset that they signed Isaiah Kiner-Falefa. I thought some assortment of Orelvis and Barger could have figured it out at third base this year. I get that you want, big league precedent for a team that is trying to win the division, but like this guy has the capability to hit 25 homers as a rookie this
Yep.
year, and he's not going to get that opportunity because they're going to keep trying the Kevin Biggio IKF thing, and like I think that's unfair to Orelvis Martinez.
Still just 22 years old, by the way. So like
But
he
he's
made that
ready,
stride.
man.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he made that stride as a 21-year-old. Like had those things click, figured it out. And look, there's going to be swing and miss there. Like I get it. Like there will be swing and miss there, but he has hedged that enough. And I think at the very least this year could help them a ton as a lefty masher. In 150 plate appearances, he's got an OPS just under 1,000 against lefties. So like that's an area where he could have definitely been a value to them. And just seeing the way that he has been able to cut down on some of the more ridiculous chase, turn into a solid defender at third, and still tap into that ridiculous game power. Martinez is going to be an above average regular, I think. And I think he's going to be able to keep that swing and miss in check enough. I know there might be some growing pains, and that's why they didn't want to count on him. But I feel like he should get an opportunity early this year. Now I just don't know where he fits in. But this guy's just about big league ready, or at least deserves a big league shot.
They'll find a place for him, man. Like I'm not too worried about it because at the end of the day, like, hey, you know what? Might as well just move IKF to second and put Biggio on the bench, and Orelvis is going to play third. There is a jigsaw puzzle that can be played to get Orelvis Martinez at bats. Unfortunately, it just doesn't look like opening day, and that frustrates me.
Exactly, and I'm with you. And I think he's going to put up some crazy numbers in AAA once he just gets another taste of the same thing. Where he was just
already
pretty
doing
much
it.
consistent
Yeah.
all year. He was putting up numbers all year long. So, I think it's going to be more of the same from the 22-year-old who feels like he's 25.
Yes.
Number one, not much suspense here. Ricky Tiedemann. It's been a roller coaster in terms of health too for this guy, right? We've talked about just kind of a up and down for a lot of these top prospects in the system. Tiedemann is on the upswing as well because he showed well in the Arizona Fall League, and most importantly, was able to shoulder a workload again. 4 straight outings of 70 plus pitches was not something he had done in a long time. I don't think since 2022 at some points. I mean, he's missed a lot of time, but has not missed entire seasons. Just ends up missing stretches of seasons with different ailments. But when he's healthy, I mean, he's one of the most dominant pitching prospects that we've got, right? I mean, in terms of what you're going to get from the left side, it's 3 potentially plus pitches, or I think 3 pitches that are pretty much plus already. You got a plus heater, you got a slider that's bordering on double plus, and then a changeup that's been a plus pitch as well. And, the results are as we've seen them, a guy that strikes out like 40% of batters through a lot of stretches and just overpowers guys from a funky slot. He's still just 21 years old. And I think at this point, it's pretty evident that as long as Tiedemann's healthy and around the zone enough, like he doesn't even need to have great command, just fringy command, he can be a big league middle rotation starter now. If he can get that command closer to average or slightly above, he can be a frontline type of guy. But I think the biggest concern is just, can he stay healthy? Because 3 plus pitches from the left side, that's always going to play.
Always. The thing that he has that nobody at this age has is a really good changeup, like a borderline great changeup. It's almost always fastball slider. You're trying to figure out the third pitch when you're this wonderkind of an arm. But if you have that third pitch, like we talked about the Spencer Strider ascension, right? Where he was a 2-pitch guy. He was so stupidly successful as a 2-pitch guy. It's Happy learned how to putt when Strider learned how to throw his changeup. Skeens. What are we looking at with Paul Skeens? Third pitch. That's all we're looking at with Paul Skeens right now. Like, okay, pitch shape my ass with Skeens, right? And then you've got slider too. Like, that's a 70 fastball and an 80, 75 slider with Paul Skeens. I don't remember the pitch by pitch grades.
Yeah, it's right there, 70, some maybe a little bit better than that.
So, like, okay, 270s. If a changeup comes, that guy turns into a Cy Young candidate from the jump, or like a frontline guy from the jump.
Yeah,
that's Tiedemann at this point, and we're hoping the command gets there.
It's particularly, you bring up a great point. It's particularly the fastball command too, because like we saw with Skeens, like with the fastball, he was just in the slider, just spotting. Tiedemann spots the slider, but the fastball, for whatever reason, was inconsistent for him, and has been in terms of just being able to spot it consistently. If he's working east-west with that fastball and up-down, I mean, he's gonna have that slider coming off of it from the 3-quarter release point. and you're just not going to be able to differentiate it. And then you're going to have the changeup working off of that as well. The way that he's going to be able to sequence, because he can start you with the fastball up and then snap a slider off of that, or he could freeze you with a fastball at the knees and then, finesse a changeup that drops below the zone, off of that. Like the fastball sets the tone for him because it's so damn good. And then he has 2 quality secondaries working off of that. What's great too is he's so confident in that slider now. He used to throw the slider and the changeup equally. Now he's throwing that slider even more than the changeup and throwing it against righties and lefties with a ton of success. So like he can change his looks so much. You could go fastball slider all the way through a lineup, whether it's lefty or righty heavy. And then the second time through could be more fastball changeup. Like he's also a guy that could probably get through a lineup throwing predominantly fastballs because of how quick it gets on guys and how nasty it can be if the command is there. So this guy can be a front line arm if he can stay healthy and the fastball command gets better. You assume that, he doesn't do both of those things to the best of his ability just because that's like the peak outcome. If the fastball command is always kind of a little bit inconsistent, I think this is still a really solid number 2 starter. And at the very least, you got a quality middle of the rotation arm. If the health becomes an issue, that could be what ultimately moves him to the bullpen. But in terms of his ability to pitch, and I'm not here to really project health because, his body looks good. He's athletic on the mound. It just seems like more of an anatomy thing for him. Like, I think if he has to move to the bullpen, he's a lights out reliever. But I think it's only going to be a health reason as to why he can't stick as a starter, because even now he's a guy that could just get away with super high walk rates relative to other starters like the Blake Snell special. Right. But I think he's got better command than that in the tank. As it's hard to have consistently good command when you're on and off the IL with arm issues that probably, make you kind of protect it, adjust your mechanics a little bit. Like I do think that there's average command in here, which at that point it's game over. Like the Blue Jays have, one of their key rotation pieces for a long time.
Yeah. So there's a reason they call him Thicky Tiedemann. Like he's built like a tank. He's built like a horse. I will say, and I'm not comping the physique at all because these guys could not be more different, but watch that GIF. Watch the arm path. Sail. No, there's a lot of sail with the whip and the 3/4.
There's definitely some sail in there.
And what I will say about Sale is even at the peak of his powers, he didn't always have fastball command, and his fastball would spray a little bit, and he would miss up, he would miss out to righties, but he always had that kind of sweeping slider. He was throwing the sweeper, he was throwing the slurve when like not many guys could do it from that slot. And Ricky may feel more comfortable with that whipping 3/4 motion, that Sale-esque arm path that he takes, just dotting the slider because that's what feels natural. The fastball may be the thing that feels unnatural. We always just assume that the fastball is the thing that feels natural. Maybe the slider just naturally goes with the arm path. And the thing about Sale that a lot of people forget, sorry, one more thing. The thing about Sale that a lot of people forget, and he kind of ditched it, I think, when he got to Boston, or at least when he got unhealthy, when he started dealing with those issues. When he was in Chicago, he had like a change equivalent. It might have been like a split change or something. That was disgusting from that slot because it had that vertical drop. There's a lot of Sale in the arm path and the way the ball moves.
And it's really hard to differentiate the changeup from that slot. All I was going to say when I was going to chime in was just that you're 100% correct. And that I think that the slider comes way more natural to him from that slot. Like, I just think it's just easier. Talk about pronators and supinators. Like clearly a supinator, I think it's just easier for him to have to snap it from that arm slot versus trying to keep a fastball going where you want it to go when you're, not always over the top of it. And I think you hit the nail on the head there, but I think that's the template to look at because of the way everything can work off of it. When you look at a Chris Sale, and I mean, it could be really scary. And the thing with him is the velocity is already there. He's sitting mid 90s. He was holding it pretty decently well, later into these outings in the Arizona Fall League. Obviously you saw a little bit of a taper down, but that's natural because he had not thrown 70 plus pitches, but he looked like he was, handling the workload pretty well. If he can just continue to handle the 75 pitch workload, every fifth day, I think he's a guy that could get up to the big leagues and, be a 5 and dive guy for them while he continues to build up. But I think could help them in some capacity as soon as this year, and then grow into, what we think he can be as a potential frontline guy.
For sure.
That'll do it for this episode. Thank you so much for those who have been tuned in with us for every single farm system we've done so far. That puts us past the halfway point here. So excited to keep churning through these farm systems. We'll be moving on to the National League East going into next week and beyond. So very pumped about that. Also, keep an eye out in the next week or so, probably 2 weeks. We'll have that top 100 update coming out. And a reminder, if you want to support the bonus call-up content, that link is in the episode description. And really appreciate the support there. It was fun to put together that first episode this past week. Anything else, Jack, before we wrap up?
I don't think so. It's not a good system by any stretch, Toronto. It is probably average because of the talent they have up top. They've got probably 3 consensus top 100 guys and maybe a 4th fringe top 100 guy in Barger. We'll see the update in a couple of weeks, but I think those are the guys that kind of carry this system. I'm fascinated by the way the rest of the arms pan out. A Maroudis, a Watts-Brown, a Chad Dallas, a Macko.
And I think those guys can really push this system, to the next level. And then having some of those high floor pieces that outside of the top 5, and a Jimenez and a Kasevich does help. So I agree. It's kind of closer to the middle of the pack, but definitely heading in the right direction. As always, thank you for listening. Look forward to talking prospects with you later this week.